Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to talk about breaking up.
But, not the kind involving angry text messages or returning a box of old sweaters.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. I mean, we are talking about high-stakes breakups here, the kind that happen in the world of billion-dollar infrastructure projects.
Right.
We're talking about when a massive construction deal just goes completely south and the employer decides it's finally time to show the contractor the door.
It is effectively the corporate equivalent of a divorce,
Right.
but with much, much more paperwork and significantly higher legal fees.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And usually there's a half-built skyscraper or a power plant just sitting in the middle of it all.
Exactly. And to really understand how this works, we are looking at what is essentially the prenup of the construction world, the FIDIC 2017 Conditions of Contract for EPC turnkey projects.
Which most people in the industry just call the Silver Book.
Right, the Silver Book. And for those of you listening who actually manage these mammoth projects, you know the Silver Book is unique. It's specifically designed for turnkey projects.
Things like refineries, power plants, massive infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. Projects where the contractor is taking on almost all the risk. So when we look at Clause 15 today, which covers termination by employer, we are seeing the employer wielding maximum power.
It sounds incredibly dry, I know. Clause 15.
Yeah, it does sound like a textbook.
But having read through this material, I realize this is actually where all the drama lives. This is the exact part of the contract that deals with the really heavy stuff. Bankruptcy, corruption, total abandonment, and the absolute collapse of a project.
It is the nuclear option.
It really is. You have to understand, if you are running a major project, terminating the contractor is almost never your first choice.
Because it's a nightmare, right?
It's messy, it's ridiculously expensive, and it causes massive delays. But Clause 15 exists because sometimes there's just no other choice.
And when you pull that lever, you need to know exactly what happens next.
Precisely.
So our mission for this deep dive today is to figure out the mechanics of this. How does an employer legally fire a contractor without getting sued for wrongful termination? What happens to all the money? And does the contractor just pack up their toolbox and go home?
Well, spoiler alert, they might not even get to take the toolbox.
Oh, okay, I love that. Let's unpack this. So let's set the stage. Let's say I'm the employer. I've hired a contractor to build a billion-dollar oil refinery. They're constantly late, they're making structural mistakes, the safety record is an absolute disaster, and I'm just fed up. Can I just walk onto the site on a Tuesday morning and shout, "You're fired"?
Absolutely not. If you do that, you are going to be the one paying massive damages for wrongful termination.
Really? Even if they are doing a terrible job?
Even then, FIDI is very procedural. It is completely obsessed with due process. Before you ever get to the actual firing, there is a strict protocol you have to follow. We generally call it the warning shot.
Okay, the warning shot. This is subclause 15.1, right?
Yeah.
The notice to correct.
Correct. This is for when the contractor is failing to carry out an obligation, but it's not necessarily a total disaster yet. Maybe they are, ignoring certain safety protocols, or they keep using the wrong grade of concrete on a secondary structure.
So I can't just terminate them immediately for that?
Yeah, no. You have to issue a formal notice to correct.
And reading through the text, it's pretty specific about what this letter actually needs to say. It's not just an angry email to the project manager.
Far from it. And this is honestly where a lot of project managers trip up in the real world. They send a vague, strongly worded complaint letter, and they think that counts as a legal notice.
But it doesn't.
Not under subclause 15.1. The notice must do three very specific things. First, it has to describe the failure clearly. You can't just write workmanship is poor. You have to say the welding on the north pipeline does not meet the specific radiographic standards required.
Specificity is key. Got it. And the second thing...
Second, you have to cite the specific subclause of the contract that they're violating.
So I can't just say you're doing a bad job.
Right. You have to say you are in breach of subclause 4.1. If you don't actually link the physical failure to the legal contract, it's just a complaint. It is not a formal notice to correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Make it legal. And what's the third requirement?
The third is the deadline. You have to specify a reasonable time for them to actually fix the problem.
Reasonable. That is always such a lawyer word. Who defines reasonable?
It is a lawyer word, but it matters functionally. You can't ask a crew to rebuild a massive concrete foundation in 24 hours. It has to be physically possible.
Because if it's impossible...
If you set an impossible deadline, an arbitrator will almost certainly throw out your entire notice later when the dispute goes to court.
Okay, so I follow the rules. I send this perfect letter. I say, fix the concrete in 14 days per subclause, whatever.
Hmm.
Can the contractor just ghost me? Like leave it on read?
Not if they want to keep their multi-million-dollar job. The text explicitly says they must immediately respond. They have to send a notice back describing exactly how they're going to fix the issue and when they will start the repair work.
Now, there was one little sentence in this section that I highlighted because it felt like a massive trap for the contractor. It says, the time specified in the notice shall not imply any extension of the time for completion.
Ah, yes, that is the trap. And it is crucial to understand. Let's say the entire refinery project is due on December 31st. In November, you screw up a cooling tower, and I give you 20 days to fix it under a notice to correct it. You, as the contractor, might think, oh, great, I have 20 extra days added to my schedule.
But you don't.
You absolutely do not. The main deadline for the whole project hasn't moved an inch. You have to fix your mistake and still try to finish the entire project on time.
It's kind of like getting a flat tire during a car race. You have to pull over and stop to fix the tire, but the race doesn't pause for you.
Right.
You have to fix it and then drive twice as fast just to catch up to where you were.
That is a perfect analogy. In the construction industry, we call that constructive acceleration. You are essentially forcing the contractor to throw double the manpower and resources at the job just to stay still.
Which has to be incredibly expensive.
It burns cash at an unbelievable rate.
So a notice to correct isn't just a friendly warning, it's a real financial squeeze.
Exactly. It puts them under immense pressure.
That definitely changes how I view that clause. But let's say the contractor ignores the warning, they just don't fix the concrete. Or maybe they do something way worse. This brings us to section 2 of our deep dive. The red card.
Subclause 15.2, termination for contractor's default. This is the end of the road.
The list of reasons you can terminate someone here is basically a catalog of disaster. I was reading through subclause 15.2.1, and it's quite the list.
It is a very comprehensive list of sins. The first one, obviously, is what we just discussed. Failing to comply with the notice to correct. If you didn't fix the problem after the formal warning, you're out.
Makes sense. Then there's abandonment.
Right. Subparagraph B. This is triggered if the contractor plainly demonstrates an intention not to continue performance of their obligations.
What does that actually look like on the ground? Do they send a formal letter saying, hey, I quit?
Rarely. Abandonment is almost always a behavior, not a statement.
How so?
They stop bringing new materials to the site. The daily workforce slowly drops from 500 people down to maybe 50. They might not have officially quit on paper, but if they pull all their heavy machinery off-site, that's abandonment. It's usually a slow fade.
Got it. There's also all the financial stuff. Subparagraph G covers bankruptcy, insolvency, liquidation. Basically, if the contractor runs out of money, the employer can just terminate.
That is standard protection. You do not want a bankrupt company trying to build your suspension bridge. The employer needs the ability to cut the cord immediately to protect the asset.
But there are also severe ethical breaches. Subparagraph H allows termination for corruption, fraud, collusion, or coercion.
This is significant in international projects. If you are caught bribing a local government official, or if you are caught in a massive fraud scheme, the contract has zero tolerance.
And there's one about subcontracting, right? Like, if I hire your company to build the main tower, and you secretly hire someone else entirely to do the whole thing without asking me.
Exactly. That is subparagraph F. You cannot subcontract the whole of the works or assign the contract without the employer's agreement. That is a material breach of trust and contract.
Okay, so let's say the contractor commits one of these major sins. How fast does the axe actually fall? Is it immediate? You're fired today.
It depends on the specific sin. For most breaches like failing to comply with a notice to correct or general delays, it's a two-step process.
Big steps.
Yes. The employer gives a notice of their intention to terminate.
Intention. So it's basically like, hey, I'm seriously thinking about firing you.
It's the absolute final warning. If the contractor doesn't fix the issue within 14 days of receiving that notice of intention, the employer issues a second notice, and that second notice terminates the contract immediately.
So you get 14 days to just stare into the abyss and try to save your company.
Precisely. But there is an exception to that 14-day rule.
The really bad stuff.
Right. For the cardinal sins, which the contract specifically identifies as subparagraphs F, G, and H, there is no 14-day grace period.
So that's, let me just check my notes here. That's subcontracting without permission, bankruptcy, and corruption.
Correct. If you are caught bribing a port official, or if your company goes into liquidation, I don't have to give you 14 days to unbribe someone or magically find $50 million.
Right, that would be absurd.
I can issue one single notice, and you are terminated immediately. The exact date you receive that notice is the date the contract dies.
Okay, so the hammer drops. The contract is officially dead. The contractor's fired. Now we get to the really messy part,
Mm.
the aftermath.
That gets very messy.
I always just imagine that when you get fired from a construction job, you just pack up your pickup truck, take your tools, and drive away.
It is significantly more hostile than that in these mega projects.
Yeah.
Subclause 15.2.3 and 15.2.4 lay out the exact procedure.
First off, you have to leave.
Yes, you must leave the cost mine. If you don't, the employer has the legal right to expel you. But, and this is a massive but, you might not be taking your stuff with you.
This is what I found completely wild when reading the source material. The employer can demand all the contractor's documents and design documents.
Think about the immense leverage here. You are halfway through building a highly complex chemical plant. Only the contractor really knows where the underground pipes are supposed to go next based on their specific shop drawings.
Right.
If they walk away with the blueprints and the design calculations, the employer is left with $1 billion concrete paperweight.
So the contract essentially forces them to hand over all their intellectual property.
Yes. All design documents, specifications, and technical drawings must be delivered to the employer immediately upon termination.
And the employer can just use them, even though they just fired you.
Yes. Subclause 15.2.4 explicitly says the employer can use any goods, contractor's documents, and other design documents to complete the works.
That is brutal.
They can do it themselves, or, and this is every contractor's worst nightmare, they can hand your proprietary designs to your biggest competitor to finish the job.
That is serious salt in the wound. You're fired. Give me your highly detailed drawings. I'm giving them to your rival down the street.
Exactly.
But what about the physical equipment? Massive tower cranes, the bulldozers, the custom scaffolding.
That is where it gets really interesting from a legal perspective. The text says the employer gives a notice when they're completely done using the equipment to finish the project, and then the contractor can come get it. However,
Here comes the however.
if the contractor owes the employer money, the employer can legally withhold that equipment.
Wait, they can hold the bulldozers hostage.
Essentially, yes. Clause 15.2.4 states that if the contractor has failed to make a payment due to the employer, all that equipment can actually be sold by the employer to recover the debt.
Wow. So let me get this straight. I fire you, I keep your custom designs to finish the job, and if you owe me money for the delays, I auction off your crane.
It is a brutal, punitive provision. It effectively changes the entire role of the employer. They aren't just a client anymore. They are holding millions of dollars in collateral.
That is incredible leverage.
It is designed to prevent the contractor from holding the site hostage by stripping the equipment out, but it leaves the fired contractor completely defenseless.
Speaking of owing money, let's talk about the final bill. Section 4 of our outline. Counting the cost. How do they actually figure out who owes who when the dust settles?
It starts with a formal valuation under subclause 15.3. As soon as the termination happens, the employer's representative has to step in and determine the exact value of the work that was actually done up to that specific point.
So it's like, you successfully built 3 concrete walls. Here is exactly what 3 walls are worth.
Yes, but with a major catch. The valuation does not include any work or materials that don't strictly comply with the contract.
Oh, I see.
If the third wall is structurally sound but slightly crooked and out of spec, you get zero credit for it.
Harsh, but I guess fair.
Yeah.
So once they do this math, does the employer write a check for the good work?
Not yet. Under subclause 15.4, the employer is legally allowed to withhold payment. They can stop paying the contractor entirely until they figure out exactly how much it's going to cost to finish the entire project without them.
Because hiring a brand new contractor midstream is probably way more expensive, right?
Always. You have massive mobilization costs, lost time, generally higher rates. Plus, you have the risk premium the new guy charges because he has to take over someone else's potentially messy work.
Nobody wants to clean up someone else's mess for cheap.
Exactly. And the fired contractor is on the hook for all of that extra cost.
Wait, the fired contractor pays the difference.
Every single penny. Subclause 15.4 FA says the contractor pays for the additional costs of execution. Basically, the price of cleaning up their failure.
Give me an example of how bad that can be.
If the original contract was for $100 million, and because of the disruption it cost the employer $120 million to finish it with a new team, the fired contractor owes that extra $20 million.
That is staggering. And the text mentions delay damages again in this section too.
That is the real sting in the tail I mentioned earlier. Subclause 15.4c. Usually, a termination for default happens because the project is severely late.
Right.
The contractor remains liable for delay damages for every single day between the original deadline and the actual date of termination.
So let's just summarize the financial hit for the contractor in this default scenario. You don't get paid for your recent work. You lose your proprietary designs. You might lose your heavy equipment. You pay for the new guy's premium to finish the job. And you pay daily penalties for being late.
Yes, it is usually a company-ending event. It almost guarantees insolvency for the contractor.
Okay, that is the absolute nightmare scenario. That's the bad breakup. But as we read in the Silver Book, there is another way this can end, isn't there? A weirdly polite way.
Yes, there is. Section 5 of the contract covers termination for employer's convenience.
This is the classic, it's not you, it's me clause.
That is exactly what it is. Subclause 15.5. It states the employer can terminate the contract at any time for the employer's convenience.
Wait, at any time? So even if the contractor's doing a genuinely great job, hitting all the deadlines, perfect safety record, the employer can just wake up one day and say, nah, I don't really want a power plant anymore.
Yes, they can. And it happens. Mega projects get canceled, government funding dries up, local politics change, maybe there was a sudden regime change or a coup in the country.
Right. Things outside anyone's control.
The employer needs a clean exit strategy that doesn't involve falsely accusing the contractor of failure just to break the contract.
So what's the actual procedure here? It must be friendlier than the default termination we just talked about.
Much friendlier. First, the employer gives notice. Second, they must return the performance security immediately. That's the massive bank guarantee the contractor put up.
Which frees up a lot of capital for the contractor.
Exactly. And third, unlike the default scenario, the employer must stop using the contractor's documents.
Ah, right. They can't keep the blueprints this time.
Generally, no. Unless they've specifically paid for those designs already, the logic is quite simple. We aren't building this facility anymore, so we don't need your intellectual property.
But there's a catch here, too. I saw a restriction in the text that clearly stops the employer from being sneaky with this clause.
You spotted that. It's a vital protection for the contractor. It is the anti-gaming provision. The employer cannot use termination for convenience just to execute the works themselves or hire a cheaper contractor.
So I can't fire you for convenience just because I've found some other company who promises to do the exact same job for 10% less.
Exactly. If you want to replace the contractor and keep building, you have to actually find a legitimate breach of contract. You can't hide behind convenience to swap horses midstream just to save a few bucks.
How does the contract actually enforce that?
The text explicitly says the employer shall not execute the works until the final payment is made to the terminated contractor. It strongly prevents a bait and switch.
And that payment, that's what I call the golden parachute, Section 6. Because if I'm firing you for absolutely no reason, I have to pay up.
Subclause 15.6 lays out the valuation for this scenario. Obviously, the contractor gets paid for all the work they've satisfactorily completed so far. They get paid for materials they've already ordered that can't be canceled.
Makes sense.
But subclause 15.6b adds something huge. It allows the contractor to claim for loss of profit.
That is the key difference right there. In a default termination, you lose everything and owe money. In a convenience termination, you get the profit you would have made if you had stayed and finished the entire job.
Exactly. Plus any other direct losses or damages caused by the sudden termination. The entire legal philosophy here is meant to make the contractor whole.
Right.
It puts them in the exact financial position they would have been in had the contract been fully performed.
So as the contractor, you get your full margin without having to actually do the rest of the grueling work.
Correct. It's a very good day for the contractor, all things considered.
And when do they actually get this money? The timeline in the book seemed oddly specific to me.
It is very specific. Subclause 15.7 dictates that the employer must pay within 112 days after receiving the contractor's final submission.
112 days, not 90 days, not 100 days, 112. Why that specific number?
It translates to exactly 16 weeks. It seems totally arbitrary to an outsider, but in the world of major international projects, it's actually a very tight window.
Because there's so much math to do.
Exactly. You have to thoroughly assess the claim, audit the corporate books to legally prove the lost profit, resolve disputes over the salvage value of custom materials. 16 weeks flies by when you are doing forensic accounting on a billion-dollar claim.
So if we zoom out to recap the two main paths here, if you screw up, that's default. You lose your job, You leave your precious designs behind, you might lose your heavy equipment to an auction, and you pay millions for the cleanup.
That is the bad breakup. It is highly punitive by design.
But if the employer just changes their mind, that's convenience. You pack up smoothly, take your designs, and walk away with a massive check for your lost profits, exactly 112 days later.
The amicable split.
It really highlights the sheer balance of power in these documents. The employer definitely holds the ultimate trump card termination. They can end the game whenever they want. But the contract heavily forces them to choose a lane.
It does, and choosing the wrong lane is incredibly dangerous for the employer.
Because of the liability.
Think about it. If an employer tries to aggressively terminate for default, claiming the contractor screwed up to avoid paying lost profits, and a court or an international arbitrator years later decides, actually, the contractor was performing fine, you were just being difficult,
What happens then?
the termination is legally converted.
It converts to termination for convenience.
Yes, and suddenly, instead of the contractor owing the employer $50 million for damages and cleanup, the employer owes the contractor $50 million for lost profits, plus years of interest.
Wow. That is a massive financial swing. It's basically a double or nothing bet for the employer.
Which is exactly why, despite all the immense power Clause 15 gives the employer on paper, it is rarely used impulsively in the real world. The legal blowback of getting it wrong is just too high to risk.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listeners, with a thought that really struck me while reading subclause 15.2.4.
You're talking about the asset seizure provision.
Yeah, exactly. We accept this as standard contract law, but think about what is actually happening on the ground here. We talked about how the employer can just sell the contractor's equipment if there's a disputed debt. In a massive infrastructure project, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars of heavy machinery.
Readily. Cranes, tunnel boring machines, excavators.
Does this clause effectively transform the employer from a mere client into a financial liquidator? I mean, think about it. You're a government entity or a private developer building a toll road. Suddenly, you're unilaterally seizing yellow iron and auctioning it off to pay for concrete.
It is a very valid and heavily debated question in construction law circles. In almost any other business context, if you owe me money, I have to formally sue you, win a judgment in court, and get a sheriff or a bailiff to legally seize your assets.
Right, there's a whole separate process.
But under FIDIC Clause 15, the employer just bypasses all of that and takes the keys.
It completely blurs the line between contract management and law enforcement.
It puts a tremendous amount of quasi-judicial power in private hands, often months or years before a court has ever ruled on who is actually legally right or wrong about the underlying delay. And as we know historically, power like that tends to get tested.
It really is something to chew on the next time you drive past a massive silent construction site and see those giant cranes just standing idle against the skyline. They might not just be parked for the weekend. They might actually be hostages.
They very well might be. It happens more often than people realize.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into Clause 15 of the FIDIC Silverbook. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.